I like to do this every once in a while. Instead of talking about Canadian news or polling or whatever Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre are up to, I like to talk about leftist TikTokers and respond to the way that they cover Canadian news because I think it's very telling of why the left is becoming increasingly unpopular in Canada. These people don't know what they're talking about, are snarky as heck, and they like to blame others for problems that the left, in fact, caused. And I think that this is a prime example here of TikToker Steve Boots saying that Pure Poilievre is breaking Parliament. The actual header to his post says Pure Poilievre is breaking Parliament and people aren't even noticing. How is Pure Poilievre breaking Parliament? Well, you're about to find out, and apparently it's that Poilievre's doing his job, and that's a very bad thing.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, pictured here looking strangely damp. I'm not asking why, because I don't want to know. Anyways, he has ground Parliament to a halt. For the last almost 2 weeks, he has been demanding documents from the federal government, documents that have already been turned over. But he wants the unredacted documents, which is not a thing that Parliament has asked for before, so the Speaker suggested that it should be sent to committee.
Because in the past, Steve, usually the executive, the PMO, is kind enough to actually give over the documents that people wanted in the manner that they wanted them. You know, having documents you can actually read, not covered in black ink that you can't read the words through. That's kind of a big deal. It was like they've never asked for this before because they've never had to ask for this before. Usually the documents are just presented, and unless something is actually something that you cannot have publicly known, they keep it as unredacted as possible. They weren't even giving over a bunch of the documents. They gave over some of them, and then they withheld some, and even the some that they gave over were heavily redacted. That's the problem here.
Poilievre said no! And that's where we're at. The Conservatives are stopping the House from proceeding with basically anything else. The Liberals can't really do anything about it. They would need the support from another party to put an end to things, and none of the other parties are supporting them. The reason why I want to talk about this.
So the Conservatives are not holding up Parliament. It's that the Liberals are holding up everyone else because somehow you got the Conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Greens to all say that you have to hand over the documents. If you can get those four parties to agree on something, it's probably something that objectively needs to be done. And all this is around the Green Slush Fund funding. I think it's the Sustainable Development Corporation, which the Liberals were just blatantly giving away contracts to friends. People who were sitting on the Sustainable Development Technologies Board were giving contracts to their own companies with no oversight whatsoever. So what Steve is describing here, and I've read an article in preparation for this, is something that's happened 15 times in the past, but he's pretending like it's a unique situation that Pure Poilievre has caused.
This is because of a new Leger poll that shows that Canadians don't really know that that's happening. 55% of respondents to a Leger poll said that they had no idea about the parliamentary procedural issues. And that tells us two things. Number one, nobody cares. Like Pierre Poilievre thinks that he's scoring massive political points about some documents. He's not. But this also shows that a lot of this nonsense.
The vast majority of people do not need to know about a situation in Parliament for it to be a politically effective thing to be hammering on. And it's not just politically effective, it's something that is the morally right thing to do for to have more transparency in government so we can uncover corruption and more people can be made aware of the corruption. The whole point is the real payoff for Poilievre, the Conservatives, and the NDP and the Bloc as well, is for these documents to actually become public so Canadians can understand the extent to the misuse, the misappropriation of funds in government by Liberal appointees.
Sensical political maneuvering that we see doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Like, whose vote is going to be swayed by the fact that Pierre Poilievre held up Parliament based on document demands?
This is the same man in the BC election kept going on and on about the BC Conservatives having candidates that made jokes on Twitter a few years ago or said something a little bit untoward 10 years ago in a Facebook comment. This is what he thinks is politically relevant, is people's social media posts from way before they were ever planning on running and which don't really reflect how they are going to be as people in the legislature. Because a random crank comment 10 years ago is not going to exactly flavor the way that you're going to conduct your business once you're an elected official. You know, just ask anyone else, anyone if the activity they had, I guess younger people, their online activity from when they were 14 years old probably does not reflect them into their later 20s or 30s. But apparently that's something that Steve Boots thought was a big deal, but not rampant corruption, not getting documents to show the rampant corruption, not accountability. Oh, who cares about that?
And a plurality of people, 39%, who took the poll, think that the government and opposition should work together to deal with this. Of course,
That's just because it's a generic centrist type of a thing to think. Most people think that that's probably the right thing to think. Oh, people should work together more. If they know the story, then they don't actually. Well, they would not agree that it's just the conservatives and liberals had to get better at working with each other. Greg Fergus, the liberal MP who became the Speaker of the House, is saying the liberals have to hand over the documents because that's how parliamentary procedure works. It is the legal right for the conservatives and the rest of the parties to demand these documents when the liberals do not have the majority to muscle through. And in fact, it would be immoral for them to muscle through even if they could, because again, these documents are pointing to massive corruption issues, and that should be exposed. I don't know why Steve seems to think that corruption's okay, but the left, and he obviously tends to be more of an NDP guy, I found, but the conservatives are on this side of the issue, wanting the documents. So now he is going to take the reflexive contrarian position that actually it's Poilievre that's in the wrong, without blaming Jagmeet, even though Jagmeet's also involved. So somehow, in this scenario where the NDP, the party that he likes, is on the side of Poilievre, and the Liberals are withholding the documents, somehow Steve Boots boils this entire situation down into blaming Poilievre for breaking Parliament. It's ridiculous.
Conservatives want to have an election, and that's what this is all really about. And so the real question comes to, how are we going to break through this? The Bloc Québécois could break through this debate, but they won't, because they're demanding that the Liberals pass two different bills that the Liberals aren't going to pass. One is the massive expansion of old age security, and one's about supply management on farms. The NDP aren't agreeing to break the gridlock, but it's unclear what they're demanding. Like, the NDP aren't helping, and they're negotiating, but it's really unclear what they're negotiating for. So, great job, NDP, nailing it. Sure, you're scoring tons of political points during.
Honestly, every single time the federal NDP is doing something smart, Steve Boots has a problem with it. So when Jagmeet Singh and the federal NDP broke their agreement with the Liberals and they said that they are now against the consumer carbon tax, Steve got really upset. This was a big betrayal of the NDP, that whenever the NDP does something actually does good political maneuvering, Steve's like, oh my goodness, this is the end of the party. I think he was mad that they took socialism out of the platform or something like that, out of their constitution. It was ridiculous. But this proves so many of these guys on TikTok, so many of these lefty personalities, they just don't know how politics works. They see it as the sweatiest team sport ever. That is just, my team has to win. My team has to win. And barring the NDP and the Liberals being united on an issue, which makes it easy for him to understand the issue, well, I just want the Conservatives to lose. So he's framing this entire thing as the Conservatives are bad. And he doesn't know what the NDP and the Bloc are doing, even though he just described that the Bloc wants legislative cutouts. And so they're not going to come to the rescue of the Liberals on them being corrupt. If anything, that's shame on the Bloc for not wanting the documents released regardless if the Liberals agree to pass their stuff or not, because it's just the right thing to do. But the whole point is they're not coming to their rescue because it looks bad to come to their rescue unless they're at least given something to soften the blow of helping the Liberals cover up the corruption.
In this 2 weeks of nothing happening. Who is this for? This is politicians acting like children for their own amusement. Canadians don't seem to particularly care. More than half Canadians don't even know what's happening.
Yes. Steve Boots wouldn't know anything about acting like a child, as he's wearing a Superman shirt and a beanie as his outfit in all of his videos. Here's just another one. Again, it's so contrarian to the point where I don't know who watches this. Even if you're on the left watching this, I feel like you'd get sick of this content. It's just Poilievre bad. Conservatives, nasty. And then a lot of the stuff is just trying to debunk conservatives by describing a situation or by describing something or explaining something to the audience that doesn't actually have any bearing on what the conservative like Poilievre here is saying. So here is Poilievre in a post saying, stunning, 15,000 people wait in the pouring rain for hours for some ugly reject potatoes. Thousands turned away when food ran out. Is this the 1930s? And Steve is going to explain the situation, which does not at all remedy Pierre Poilievre's concern on the state of the economy.
I want to take a second to talk about this post from Pierre Poilievre because it is appalling. Saying that it's stunning there are 15,000 people waiting in the pouring rain for hours for some ugly, rejected potatoes. Thousands turned away when food ran out. Is this the 1930s? Ah! So, a couple of things. First off, the thing that he's breathlessly offended against is a giveaway on Ugly Potato Day. I think that that would be a day dedicated to devastating grade school style burns, but no. It's a day in which local producers give away their produce that doesn't meet certain requirements. See, lots of produce is fine to eat, but doesn't pass the visual requirements for grocery stores. It's too big, too small, misshapen, whatever. Instead of throwing that food away, which was common practice for a long time, farms started just giving the food away to the community.
Okay, how does this refute Pierre Poilievre's concern that the state of our economy is such that 15,000 people showed up for Ugly Potato Day to get ugly fruits and vegetables and other rejected farm produce? It's almost like he's not like he understands the concept. The whole point is that in a normal economy where people are prospering, they don't line up in the pouring rain with crowds of people, so much so that nobody's going to be able to, not everyone's be able to get their own potato. That is kind of proof positive that we're in a bad state in the country. But I guess Boots is, I don't even get what his point is here.
You line up, you get your ugly food, everybody wins. And Pierre Poilievre
Except for a bunch of the people who didn't get them.
saw this and thought, what a nightmare, what a horrible thing. That must be stopped immediately. Of course, so many people jumped in and said, this is the end result when Marxists are in charge. Because yes, Marxists obviously in charge of Alberta, blaming mass immigration, obviously. This is an event that's gone on for nearly 15 years. Nobody's ever been concerned about it until now. But because Pierre Poilievre...
Yeah, because before, it was not nearly as many people who were participating. And they weren't participating out of potato solidarity, that everyone really loves themselves some ugly potatoes, so they showed up. For most people, time is money, and that they're not going to line up for hours to maybe get a few potatoes. The whole point is that there are a lot of people out there who are so broke because of how bad Justin Trudeau's economy is, partially because of things like high taxes as well as mass immigration, that they are lining up for these things in the pouring rain. But he's acting like, what? This never mattered in the past. He almost sounds like Bernie Sanders saying, oh, everyone's lining up for ugly potatoes. That's a good thing because they're getting ugly potatoes. It's like the whole Bernie Sanders, people are lining up in bread lines to get bread. And because they're going to get bread, that means it's good. It's like, context, Steve. Goodness.
Yeah,
this man used to be a school teacher.
Wants to frame it as some sort of like breadline thing, breathlessly offended by people being given free food. That's where we're at. Partisan politics has truly eaten this man's brain away.
If Steve was saying that about himself, it would be so accurate. He literally did the breadline thing at the end. I don't even really pre-screen these videos because I want to talk about them kind of raw without like writing down notes or anything like that, because that's boring. He actually did the breadline thing. Oh, it's good because people are getting bread. Maybe it would be better that people can just choose to get food whenever. Oh, the Ugly Potato Day is on. Oh, but we got to get our kid to soccer because we can afford to put our kid in soccer. You think those people can afford to put their kids in soccer? Either they can't, or because they put their kids in soccer, it's making it harder for them to afford other things. So they start showing up in massive numbers for things like Ugly Potato Day. I don't know why I have to explain this, but again, so much leftist content these days is blaming conservatives who haven't been in power since like 2015 for the problems of the federal government. And yes, there are provincial governments around Canada, some of which I think are having a very bad negative impact on people's standard of living, like the British Columbia NDP. I even have criticisms of conservative premiers. Danielle Smith is not exactly on my Christmas card list this year. She hasn't lowered income taxes. The wasteful spending is through the roof right now. A lot of nonsense going on that needs to be cut down on. DEI programs, ESG programs, anti-racism programs, all getting millions and millions of dollars thrown at them in our government, which I don't like. Doug Ford, awful. Bloated budget. It's patronage appointments everywhere. Just spending money, subsidizing like battery plants and whatnot to try and buy votes in specific towns. I don't like that kind of thing. But overall, it's the federal government who has the most bloated taxation kind of regime. The highest tax is on the federal level. The carbon tax is on the federal level, which voids the province's option to have one or not. We have a lot. They're blocking resource development, blocking pipelines. They're not allowing us to actually get our resources to market. There's a lot of problems that we have from the federal government. And so, but Steve only ever sees the conservative in scenario because he is a partisan hack. I can actually criticize my own side and criticize them in a way that's actually constructive and objective. Whenever Steve criticizes one of his parties, it's always because they agreed with the conservative and conservative bad, so that's tactically wrong for Jagmeet Singh or whoever else to do. This is all like very exhausting. Anyways, if you guys like the channel, this is it for this video. Make sure you subscribe, like this video. You can leave a comment, give me any suggestions for future videos. I always try and scroll through the comments at the very least. Obviously, I'm not going to reply to everyone when there's like 400 comments in a video. I'm not going to like respond to every single one, but I tend to skim it and usually I'll see like a good portion of what people think. And I scroll for a while. I'm not just looking at like the top 3 most liked comments. That oftentimes those are the ones that you kind of know are going to be there, like, Trudeau sucks or whatever. And so I always go down a bit further. But if you also want to support this show, you can donate to the Give, Send, Go fundraiser I have in the description below. We're being sued by a Chinese billionaire developer for defamation. And in 3 years, he still hasn't actually proven how we've defamed him in any way or submitted any evidence. It's just a way of trying to waste my money. And it's wasted up to $33,000 of my money, but we don't give in to bullies. So we're still fighting him. If you guys want to contribute anything, there is a link to the Give, Send, Go in the description of the video below or pinned at the top of the comments. I thank everyone who's donated. It's really helped me out. There was times where I was like, okay, unless someone donates, I'm going to have like a lot of credit card interest payments in this next month. And it's always come through. So you guys have been an absolute blessing to me. Anyway, so that's it for me today, guys. I'll probably see you tomorrow, if not with a live stream later this week. See ya.